Hi, I'm Joel Persinger from Practical Defense Systems. Thank you very much for checking out the Practical Defense Systems channel. If you're sort of a transplant from Gun Guy TV because you came over here too, I really do appreciate that. I'll try to cover some things on this channel that will also pertain to you, whether you're in security or not. And this might be one of them, actually, because I thought I would clear up some of the confusion about what exactly security guards are as opposed to police officers, what they're supposed to do and what they're not supposed to do. Because there's a lot of confusion, not only on the part of security guards, but also on the part of clients and the public. So first of all, in California, each state has its own laws, so California may be different than other places. But in California, what's happening right now is a lot of this stuff, where you see the snatch and grabs are happening all over the place. And unfortunately, in the process of all of that, you have security officers and police officers getting injured. This guy was a retired or former police officer. He was actually shot to death while standing there protecting, or at least being a good scarecrow and trying to protect a news crew. And then just the other day, a few days ago, this happened where some people went in, or some guy went in to try to steal some big screen TVs from a Target store. He was confronted by some employees and took a shot at the security guard. And then I'll show you this really quick little video. There's no sound to it. But this happened at a California mall where you can see the individual on the left, the security guard's walking by, and zap, the guard gets sprayed with bear spray. Now, we could talk about the guard's reaction, the fact that he wasn't terribly aware of his surroundings and all that kind of stuff, but I'm not going to pick on the guy. He got sprayed with bear spray, after all. And, that's not pleasant. I've been OC'd more times than I care to count. I've been deloused with pepper spray and CS mace and a few other things over the years, and it's not a pleasant experience, so I get it. Well, where does all this stuff come from, and why are we seeing this? Well, that's because of political policies mostly, and so I'll briefly talk about those. This is an article. Whoops, I'm sorry, I got the wrong thing here. Let me go get the right thing. This is an article written by John Thune, who is obviously a U.S. Senator, and the title of the article is Demonizing and Defunding Police Has Consequences. It's actually a very good article. It goes through explaining the consequences of defunding the police. But to be honest with you, the consequences should be obvious. So right now in California, we're sort of reeling from the effort to defund police all over the place. And then on top of that, California has this weird desire not to prosecute people in certain counties and cities for crimes they commit. So we have these very progressive district attorneys who are refusing to prosecute people for the crimes that they commit. And then, of course, we have the governor and the state legislature who still talk about and sometimes actually do release violent criminals from prison early for no reason other than they want to. They think that if you're nice to criminals, criminals will stop committing crimes. So when you have this sort of interesting nexus, you have police being demonized, and at the same time defunded in a lot of areas. Now, there's a lot of refunding police going on right now because people have figured out this doesn't work. And in some cases, these crazy DAs are being recalled. That's what's happening, I think, in San Francisco. But you have a combination of crazy policies that are defunding the police department, which means they have fewer officers, fewer assets, fewer resources, but they're expected to do the same amount of policing. You have a demonizing of police, which causes them to not really want to step out any farther than absolutely have to, because if an officer goes too far and makes a small mistake, it could be a big mistake, could be a small mistake, but it could be an honest mistake one way or the other. That officer's job is gone. That officer's life is destroyed. And we've seen that happen over and over and over again. Now, sometimes police officers make mistakes that are really, really, really bad. And sometimes they're just criminals dressed up as police officers. But the ones that are criminals dressed up as police officers are very rare. They're extraordinarily rare. And my experience is that law enforcement tends to weed them out pretty quickly. But nevertheless, we have this public perception that police go too far all the time, and that racism is endemic in the police department, which is not true. I can tell you that's not true. And nevertheless, what happens is now you're a cop, And you would like to do more, but you don't because you're kind of afraid to do too much and get yourself on the evening news or the national news and have your life destroyed. So cops are perhaps, in some cases, a little slower to respond, a little less likely to do as much as they used to do. So now you have that kind of a situation going on. Not only that, officers know in certain jurisdictions, even if they arrest people, the prosecutors will not prosecute them. And even if they do prosecute them and put them in jail, the jail or the prison will release them. So it's a very frustrating thing for law enforcement. Law enforcement really only works. This is the only way it works. Law enforcement only works if there is an understanding that there's the danger of being arrested, prosecuted, and imprisoned if you break the law. That's the only reason why anybody's afraid of cops. If you don't put people in prison, you don't prosecute them, they're not punished for breaking the law, then they're not afraid of the cops. If you make the cops the villains when they deal with violent people, then the violent people are no longer afraid of the cops. And so you end up with a situation like we have now, where now we have folks like these guys. They just popped up on the news the other day. These guys own a security company, and they're talking about the fact that they're being overwhelmed by requests for security guards. A very interesting article again, but this is not uncommon. And what you're seeing is they're getting calls like crazy for guards, even from stores and companies who they can't afford security. But these guys are trying to fill the bill. So there's a couple messages there. One, if you're looking for a job, security is a really good place right now because, particularly in California, because a lot of people are wondering where the cops went. But I do think it's important to note for you, if you're a store owner or you're a retailer or you're a security officer or you just want to know what the difference is and what the realities of security really are when it comes to security officers, security guards. So I've written down a few things here so that I don't forget. So there you go. So I'll see if I can get through them pretty quickly. First of all, I've been involved in the security industry for decades and owned a training company for, I think this is our 14th year. We have 20,000 students throughout the state. It is not an understatement for me to say that security guards have been the redheaded stepchild of public safety for a very, very long time. They are very poorly paid. They are very poorly trained. The public has a very poor perception of them most of the time. Now, we're talking about guards of public seas. Now, there's every level of security guard you can imagine. There's the guard walking around the mall. There's the guard sitting at the gate of the retirement home. Then there's the guards traveling inside the armored car, collecting the money and making sure it gets to the bank. And then there are security people who provide protection for executives. There are security people who do very high-end types of security, and there's everything in the middle. So when I'm talking about security, a lot of times I'm talking about the security that people see and the security that stores would want to hire right now with all the snatch and grabs and all that kind of stuff, or that, for that matter, communities might want to hire to patrol their community. Now, I'm not talking about the guys who are retired law enforcement or retired military and they're doing high-end executive protection stuff. Those people tend to get paid very, very well, but they're highly skilled, and it's a very difficult industry to get into. And, they're making pretty good money, but everybody else is struggling to pay the bills. So you have to understand that a lot of times companies that hire guards don't particularly like them. It's not a personal issue. It's just they don't like them because they're a cost center. They cost money, but it's very difficult to see any reward from them, or they don't generate revenue. It's not like if I hire a salesperson, that person generates revenue. If I hire a bookkeeper, that person just burns money. And I have to remind myself, oh yeah, the books need to be done, the taxes need to be done, so yeah, I'm paying for that. Security guards, nobody really knows what they do. They know what they expect them to do. For example, we have all these snatch and grabs going on, so retail companies, since they can't get the cops to do anything about it, will hire what people like to call a rent-a-cop. Oh, I'll hire a rent-a-cop. Well, you're not really renting a cop. When you hire a security company, you're not hiring a private police force. You're not hiring a police officer. You're hiring a security guard, a security officer. And what security officers are required to do, their mandate in the state of California, is to be a great scarecrow walk around, be visible, let people see them, and hopefully that scares the majority of criminals away, and to be a great witness, observe, and report, as the state training says. Well, here's the problem about the scarecrow thing. When we've defunded police, when we've demonized police, when prosecutors will not prosecute, and even when they do prosecute, jailers will not keep people in jail and prisons will not keep them in prison, they keep releasing them, then criminals are not afraid of police officers. Why then would they be even slightly afraid of security guards? They're not at all. That's one of the problems. When there's no consequences to illegal actions, then the threat of being seen, observed, reported, caught, it means absolutely nothing. Now let's get back to a few things. The redheaded stepchild bit. Look, you got to understand, I wrote down a few things here, but you got to understand companies don't particularly like guards because they cost money and they can't justify why. I'll give you a great example, and I've seen this before because we used to own a security company. Let's say there's a bank and the bank gets robbed. And then another branch of the same bank gets robbed. And then another branch of the same bank gets robbed. Then somebody in the bank goes, hey, how come our branches are getting robbed? We need to get some security in there. So they'll contact a security company. They'll hire the company. They'll put armed guards in every one of their banks. And now none of their banks are getting robbed. Why? Because people who want to rob the banks are going to go down the street to the bank that doesn't have a guard and rob that one. They're not going to rob the one that just got armed guards. You get it? So it's a path of least resistance. Then 6 months goes by, 8 months goes by, some period of time goes by, and some bean counter's looking at the beans and goes, what are we paying all this money for security guards for? And the answer will come back, well, no, 6, 8 months ago we had some robberies, and so we decided to get guards. And the bean counter will ask the obvious question. Well, have we had any robberies since then? No. Well, we don't need those guards anymore. And then the next time the contract comes up, they won't keep it. And the reason they won't keep it is because they're not being robbed. Why do I need a guard? I'm not being robbed. What they don't do is put two and two together and realize the reason they're not being robbed is because they have the guard. So they don't see any value in the guard. They'll let the guard go because the guard costs money. And unless they can see a return on investment that makes immediate sense to them, then they don't want to spend very much money on it. And if they are spending money on it and they can't see a return on investment, they'll cancel the contract if they can. This is why security guards don't get paid particularly well. Most of them. They really, really don't. I mean, a lot of them are working 2, 3 jobs just to pay the bills. So you got a guard who's working, making pennies compared to what the client is actually paying the company for. You hire a security company and you got to pay this per guard, but the guard's only getting paid this. You think you're paying through the nose for this, but the guard's only getting paid this. And that's why a lot of times security companies just put somebody there who can fog a mirror and has a pulse because they want the billable hours. So you should know that security guards are not particularly well trained in the state of California on the main because California doesn't require it. And typically they're not very well paid. They're very good people. And in many cases, they really want to do a great job, but they lack the training, they lack the pay. Here's the other thing. Companies will hire a guard because they don't feel safe. And they'll think, well, as security guard, I'm going to hire security and they'll keep me safe. No, not necessarily. It's not really the guard's job to do that. It's the guard's job to be a scarecrow and to observe and report. That's it. You're not hiring the Secret Service to protect you. If you want to hire somebody like that, you're going to pay through the nose for those people because they're protecting people like Jeff Bezos, right? Elon Musk and whatever. And a lot of them you don't know the names of, and neither do I. And I used to do some of that work, so I can tell you that. You get paid really well doing that, but that's not the guard you're going to hire to stand in your store. The guard that you're going to hire to stand in your store has 2 jobs. Be a good scarecrow, and when scarecrow doesn't work, observe and report it to the police, who, by the way, are being defunded, being demonized, having their powers restricted, and even if they act, the person that they catch won't be prosecuted in some jurisdictions, and even if they are prosecuted and go to prison, California will let them out early. Now you get the problem. Okay. You're not hiring a rent-a-cop when you hire security. You're hiring a scarecrow, and that scarecrow's job is to be visible, to look professional, and to scare the criminals away. The problem is California no longer has any punishment for criminals in a lot of respects, and so the criminals are not scared anymore. Let's see. I told you guards don't get paid a whole heck of a lot. I told you that the companies charge a lot, but they don't pay the guards much because they're trying to make a living too, so they got to have a profit margin. The other thing is that sometimes companies don't like guards because they don't appear to do anything. They're just walking around, or they're standing around. It's their job to walk around, stand around. They're supposed to be visible and look professional because they're scarecrows. That's all they are. When you put a scarecrow out in the cornfield, you don't expect it to do anything except stand there and scare the crows away. That's what guards are supposed to do. They do not protect people most of the time. That's not their job, is to protect people against violence. Sure, they'll usher people out of the building if it catches fire. They'll move people away from a dangerous situation. They'll let maintenance know if the floor gets wet so they can come mop it up so nobody trips and falls. That's called observing and reporting and directing traffic periodically. They do that, sure. I mentioned it's difficult to track their effectiveness because basically when a guard is really being super effective, when you have a really good security team and they're doing a great job under normal circumstances, not the ones we're in now, you don't have any incidents. Nothing happens. And the reason nothing happens is you have really good security. A lot of times, too, companies think guards can be replaced by stuff that only costs money once. And some of that is physical security stuff. Signs, alarms, lights, cameras, all the kind of things that you would think of in that regard. I mentioned banks earlier, credit unions or whatever. They'll put up the bullet-resistant barriers between plexiglass or whatever it is, between the customer and the teller. Those kinds of things are all physical security measures that you pay for them once and there they are. You don't have to do anything about them. And people tend to like those because then they don't have to worry about the guard, whether the guard's going to show up on time, whether the guard's going to look professional or not, whether the company is going to actually provide you with somebody that you like, that has a personality or whatever. So you have all the people problems, and that's an issue as well. I think the last thing to mention to you, if you're wondering about security guards, I'm just trying to tell you the truth here about how it works. If a police officer gets involved in a confrontation, they put hands on somebody, they arrest them, they take them to jail or whatever, and something goes sideways, as long as that officer operated within the law and within the department's policy or agency's policies, pretty much they're going to be defended by the agency, and they do have a limited amount of protection in the sense that they have limited or qualified immunity from being sued or being prosecuted because they're acting on the agency's behalf, on the citizens' behalf, and on the city or county or whatever municipality they work for or government they work for's behalf. And as long as they stay within the rules, within the policies, within the laws, they're very defendable, and it's not going to be on them. If they get hurt, guess what they've got? Medical coverage, dental coverage, they got all that stuff, right? Most of the time, the overwhelming majority of the time, guards haven't got any of that. They don't have any of that. They may not have any medical insurance at all. They may not have any life insurance at all. They may not have any dental insurance at all. And while the insurance company that is hired or paid for by the security company will defend the security company, it may not defend the individual guard. The guard may just be out in the cold. It all depends. And quite often when I've looked at those security insurance policies, they don't defend the security guard. So if the security guard gets in a tussle and either harms somebody or is harmed, they're not like police officers. They're on their own, which is why California does not, many reasons why, one of the many reasons why, California does not require them to do anything other than be a scarecrow and observe and report. Now, there's the truth about security guards. And by the way, under normal circumstances, being a great scarecrow and observing and reporting is a wonderful service. And it works. However, as I said, when there's no consequence for committing crimes and criminals are not afraid of the consequences because there aren't any, then the fact that you have a guard standing there as a scarecrow means nothing. So what does this boil down to? First of all, if you're a security guard, wake up. Smell the roses, and don't put yourself in a position where you get hurt or killed, because you may not be covered at all if you do. And remember what your training was when you first got licensed, that your job is to observe and report and be a great scarecrow. And don't try to be a cop. If you want to be a cop, go be a cop, okay? Because you got a lot more backing if you do, and even that right now is probably less so than it's ever been. On the other hand, if you are deciding to hire security, recognize what you're hiring and then use them appropriately based upon what you now know that you maybe didn't know before. And lastly, and maybe I should have said this first, be careful who you vote for. Vote for politicians who are going to properly fund police departments. Vote for politicians who are going to properly push for the prosecution of criminals and the imprisonment of criminals. Vote for district attorneys and attorneys or whatever, or attorney generals for that matter, who are pro-law enforcement and strong against crime, so that they will take violent criminals off the street and keep them off the street to the degree that the law allows, not release them because they want to make themselves feel better, not fail to prosecute them because they want to make themselves feel better. The whole reason we have the problems we have in California right now with crime are because of these crazy, permissive, progressive policies. That's why. And while security can help, security is not the answer. While law enforcement will do its best, law enforcement, police officers by themselves are not the answer unless there are consequences in place. All you have is a revolving door of people who are no longer afraid of the consequences, no longer afraid of law enforcement. And if that's the case, they're absolutely not afraid of the security guard that you just put in your store. We have to get real about this and have realistic expectations. So I hope this helps. If you have any questions, you're welcome to go to our website at Practical Defense Systems at pdsclasses.com, and you can send me a question. I'll try to answer it if I can. And in the meantime, if you're in California or any other state, wherever you go, just make sure that you're paying attention to your surroundings. If you're in the security business, learn from the mistakes of others so you don't have to learn them yourself. And if you're hiring security, I ask you to please use them as security is meant to be used, at least in the state of California. Each state has its own rules and its own laws, and all the things I told you may not apply in the state that you're in, but they certainly do apply in a great many of them. Well, there you go. That's all I had to say. Have a wonderful week and stay safe.